Hello. I'm very impressed that you are still with me, still listening to this course. Well, fortunately, it's about to be over. Today, I'll finish with Najdorf, and we are going to analyze today probably the most popular, considered to be the most dangerous, at least the most popular on the top level move, or two moves, bishop e3 or f3. Well, actually it is f3 or bishop e3. Actually it is the same system, but then there are some nuances, because most of the time white is playing both bishop e3 and f3. But sometimes, let's say if white is starting with f3, then it's very difficult to avoid playing bishop e3 against both e6 system or e5 system. But in case if white starts with bishop e3, he has additional options. Well, unfortunately for white, black also has additional options, and quite interesting. So I would start with bishop e3, and first I'm going to show you all the theory where white is not playing f3, so we don't have the pawn on f3. And then via the 6 f3 move order, well, then we will consider all the main lines, actually. Because most of the time, the main lines are with those both moves played. So what is the difference? The difference is that, as I've mentioned already, after both e6 and e5, white has quite interesting, actually perfectly playable, and in case of e6 move, even maybe more dangerous than f3 options. But black has, now he gets knight g4 variation, which is, was pretty much developed by Garry Kasparov, and frankly, at the moment, it's doing pretty well for black. White is not able really to pose big problems. Of course, a little bit here and there. White has quite a number of tries, but at this moment of time, on the top level, knight g4 is bothering white a lot. By the way, that is why quite often I can see that white is playing bishop e3, so he wants to play this system, but maybe, let's say, after e6 to try to play without f3, and in case if black playing knight g4, quite often white is just playing bishop c1 here, because the best move is considered to be back knight f6, and now already playing f3 or other system. So that actually shows that most of players, they don't really have any big idea against knight g4. But of course things are not so easy. So not that it's totally and easily equalizing knight g4, of course not, but it's a very serious option. So let's start bishop e3. So there, in general, let's say after f3, there are two main. As often in Najdorf, there are two conceptually different options. One is to play with a pawn on e6, another is e5. Lately, most of the strong players, they are trying to play e5 in most of the lines against Najdorf. So maybe it's a matter of fashion, but also engines are more favoring e5 setups. And here also after bishop e3, I remember end of 90s, beginning of the century, e6 was the most popular, and then slowly e5 started to get, to overtake the e6 move, because Garry Kasparov, as I've already mentioned before, he liked very much to play these structures with a pawn on e6, these Scheveningen structures, and he played quite a lot after bishop e3, e6, or after f3, e6, of course with very good results, which not necessarily correspond to the objective assessment of positions he was getting, but that's a point of Najdorf and Sicilian in general, that you might get maybe objectively not totally sound position, but the game is so complicated that, in comparison with Ruy Lopez or especially openings like Petrov, well, if you get slightly worse, probably you will just defend for the rest of the game. And, if you're playing strong opponent, and you'll probably make a draw, maybe, or maybe you lose. In Sicilian, you can get worse objectively, let's say, according to the computer assessment, and win games. Still win games because the position is very sharp, and one mistake and the situation can turn completely upside down. So that's why Gary, he was having a very good feeling of this opening. Also, he was a pretty good chess player. So altogether, was actually bringing these incredible results which he had. I remember in one of the Lenares, I believe it was 1999. He was just winning every Sicilian with black, and it was a very top tournament, just crushing all opponents. I think I was almost the only one of few who made a draw with him with white, but only because I played first d4, because I think Gary won against Anand with black, against Svidler with black, Ivanchuk with black, all these Sicilians, mostly Niders. Or I think Svidler played anti-Niders, but Anand and Ivanchuk played Niders and got crushed. But again, now e6 is not so popular, much less popular, not actually so much because it's bad. It's not bad, but e5 is and knight g4 after bishop e3, both moves are, white is also actually struggling to find any real advantage. Of course, the game is complicated and a lot of ideas for both sides, but it seems to be doing pretty well for black. So, and after e6, white has many options. So I would, frankly, even if you decide to play with black the e6 system against f3, I'm going to show it to you later. Against bishop e3 move, I just would advise you to think twice, to play e6 or maybe to play knight g4. Because after e6, now, of course, on top of the f3 move, which would transpose simply, white has quite a number of dangerous options, actually. First, bishop e2 move. Now, actually, you should check the lesson in this course, which was about the bishop e2 and then black playing e6. And actually, I told that maybe the most dangerous plans are connected not with a castle, but more with the bishop e3 and then f4, g4, those ideas. I've explained exactly the state of theory, and in my opinion, it's a pretty dangerous system, so not so easy for black to equalize. Therefore, this is one of interesting ways, that in case if black plays e6, if you're playing white, you can think of playing bishop e2, because starting with bishop e2, if you still remember, then e5 was, I think e5 is actually a good move, and I don't see, frankly, any advantage for white after e5, but after e6, I thought that this bishop e3 was interesting. So this is one kind of annoying thing for black after e6, that bishop e2 is not easy at all. Then the second annoying thing, and maybe the most annoying, is g4. And it's a very, very dangerous move, g4. Now, game gets pretty direct because you have to play e5. Of course, you have other moves, but I believe other moves simply do not equalize. For instance, d5, white has two ways actually to be slightly better. One is g5, knight e4 takes on e4 and queen g4, and then white gets this pawn back with some initiative. But even simple ed is also not completely equal. After exchanges, rook g1, then bishop g2 comes. White has better development, and the bishop on this long diagonal is quite active. So d5 doesn't really equalize. And then white wants g5, so carries attack. We've studied it in this style and in the style of carries attack, and it's not easy for black. So e5 probably is the best move. Knight f5 now. again, now g6 or h5. Of course, black has to do something quick. If white develops, well, he will be better with this knight on f5. So g6 is definitely the main line. h5 was played from time to time, even if I remember correctly, by Garry Kasparov himself once, and Boris Gelfand played it. But I have a feeling it doesn't equalize. I think that after g5, knight takes e4 has to be played. Knight takes g7 check, bishop takes g7, knight takes e4, d5, it's pretty forced line, and knight g3. And this position, while theory still goes on, it's not too bad for black, but I couldn't find an equality in this line. So that's why g6 is usually played. And now the fun starts. g5, have to take on f5, ef5, d5 is the best move, queen f3. And here, well, at that time, well, engines were quite weak at that moment. And so this position, maybe now there is a more clear verdict about it. Even though, again, the position is so difficult to analyze, even for computers, that I'm not sure there is a final verdict about this position. But with black, to play it with black, well, you need really to memorize move per move a lot of variations. I mean, the position is completely crazy, impossible to play it over the board. I mean, with white it's easy, at least white is attacking. Well, sometimes two pieces down, but still it is trying to give mate. But black, with a king on the center, you need to be a fantastic calculator to calculate variations well, and maybe even better than this is just to analyze it, for 1 week and to memorize it all, because d4, it's practically only moves for black, otherwise he's worse. Long castle, knight bd7, and now white has main move is bishop d2, but there is also bishop takes d4 move, for example. There is also bishop c4 move. I mean, it's a very interesting position, of course. Of course, it's very exciting, unless you are playing it with black. You see it with, I was always afraid, because even if it's the end of the day, it's a draw, and actually white is not worse here for sure. Shirov, by the way, won many games. Of course, you understand it's very much in his style, and he won many games with white here. I think at the end of the day, the final assessment was that black is holding a draw. But such a complicated long lines that somehow I think that is the main reason why most of people do not want to play e6 after bishop e3, at least because of this line. I remember, for instance, there was a beautiful victory. Bishop d2 is the main move. A beautiful game, Judith Polgar with Visha Anand. Judith won with white. Just to show you how the game can develop, dc bishop c3, Visha played bishop g7, and now very cool move rook g1. And the game continued, very beautiful game. So all in all, this is, to me, it's quite a problem, I believe, for black. Again, I'm not sure that every one of you, he wants to memorize all those lines and try to finally to end the game by some perpetual check. So, but after g4, I'm afraid that if you don't go for that line, probably you will not equalize. But on top of everything, all those miseries, which are already f3 transposition, bishop e2, very serious line, g4, you need to have incredible memory and to make a lot of work. But then lately also white discovered a3 move. Rather strange move, kind of waiting, useful move, of course. But also it's quite interesting. This is rather new, this a3. I mean, of course, new engines are getting stronger and stronger. And then they found this move, and actually it makes a lot of sense. Don't laugh, but it makes sense. Because the idea is that in case of b5, white is playing g4 already. And here, this line with e5, knight e5 is already simply not good. I mean, simply bad, I would say. So black is playing bishop b7, bishop g2, and this position, we know more or less this type of position. I think, for example, we have the 6 h3 in neither variation e6 g4, yeah. And if you remember, I didn't like the move b5 there because of bishop g2 and this type of play. And here also it seems that it's quite dangerous for black. At least engine's given quite considerable advantage for white already here. So b5 not, then bishop e7 is another logical move, but now maybe g4 also maybe not so easy to equalize. Of course, white has other moves as well, but g4 and let's say after d5, I don't know if it's so clear. If this position, knight d7, f4, okay, because if check, maybe even king d2. This is already becoming more or less a French structure, but probably this should be perfectly playable for black. But also e d5. Knight d5, queen d5, rook g1, a similar position as we have just checked. Okay, we are checking without a3, bishop e7. Here, well, obviously, bishop e7, a3 is in black's favor, but still, compared to that variation. But still, well, he needs to prove that he fully equalized black, because white has the same idea. Bishop g2, queen leaves, long castle, and maybe still not so easy to equalize. So then after a3, maybe knight c6 then is a better try, but then again white has ways, maybe starting with a4, starting with bishop e2, and then it will again transpose to some kind of Sicilian. You remember I was telling you that this variation is quite dangerous for black. Here, of course, a bit less because the pawn is on a3, so white kind of lost half tempi playing a3, but actually a3 is pretty useful move. So in this sense that white is going to castle, let's say b5, I don't know, king b1, then f4, g4. It's a whole new area of research. Not so many games still, but it's not harmless. If you are playing black, you need also seriously to study the a3 move. So all in all, it makes it, especially considering the fact that e5 and knight g4 are doing pretty well nowadays with black. So this makes it, most of top players avoid playing e6 because it gives just too big choice for white and too many options which are pretty dangerous and not easy to equalize with black. But of course, it's playable. Again, if you really like to have the pawn on e6 in this variation, after f3 or after bishop e3, well, quite some work has to be done, but for sure you will find playable positions. So, and for white, yes, you have a choice. You can transpose to the f3 variation, or you can play one of those lines. Quite a nice choice. So you decide what you like more. That's why, e6 is, after bishop e3, is slowly but surely becoming more and more rare guest in the tournament practice. Then let's investigate e5 move. So if you decide to play with e5, let's say after f3, if you decide to play e5 system, instead of e6, then of course it's also logical after bishop e3 to play e5. And I will show you now only systems where, white has a couple of options to play without f3. I don't really think it's so dangerous. You should just know accurate move orders, but basically I think black is doing pretty fine. So then if you are playing f3, e5, then I would advise you just to play bishop e3, e5. So, well, main move is knight b3, but then after knight b3, black is playing bishop e6. And here, it's difficult for white. White has f4, otherwise it will, this or that way, it will transpose to some systems. For example, if bishop e2, this is transposing to the bishop e2, e5, knight b3 system. So 6 bishop e2, which we have already studied. Then h3 is a possible move. Then for this position, you can check the lesson on the 6 h3 and after e5 knight b3. So I have already check this. I mean, I already explained how to play with black against. I think black is fine also here. So those are the transpositions. That's why, well, white usually plays with the f3 or queen d2 followed by f3, and then it transposes to all those lines which we are going to consider later. Or there is maybe only one separate option independent of some other lines which we already considered or will consider, like f3. There is f4 move, but it's completely harmless because black takes ef, bishop takes f4, knight c6. Just now there is one quite nice variation. So now white has a choice. Knight d4 could have been interesting, but queen b6 is very unpleasant for white. And here knight e6, f e6, black is doing very well. Here, I mean, white maybe can still equalize probably, but no more than that, because it will be difficult to castle for white. So knight d4 is nothing. Queen d2, black can just equalize by playing d5 quite easily. So that's why usually white tries, if he already plays this line, then he's trying to play queen e2. And here, actually, anyways, white next is h3 because he cannot castle long. Bishop g4 is coming. So he is going to play h3. Therefore, even if you play bishop e7, and now h3, this position, it's again transposition to the h3 line, but you don't need even to bother with it, because actually after queen e2, rook c8 is a very, very strong move, with a very tricky idea. h3, well, otherwise difficult to find a useful move for white. And now computer is showing some incredible tactics. It's playing knight b4. Well, actually white can castle long, but it's terribly dangerous. But maybe white is not worse here. But of course it's not playing for advantage at all. But in general, knight b4, what to play a3. Yeah, it's very logical a3. And now amazing resource, knight h5. This is really beautiful. Of course, very difficult to find for humans, but engines find it immediately. And well, because queen takes h5, you take on c2 and take on b3. And in case if bishop leaves, then queen h4 check. I mean, of course, on h2, yeah, then queen h4 check is coming, and this is quite painful also. So white has to play ab, knight takes f4, and of course, taking this bishop, black is at least equal, having no problems at all. So that is about knight b3, bishop e6. But white has, yeah, via this move order, white has quite an interesting system, very positional, very quiet, so really not in the, very different to those knight b3, f3 variations, which are extremely sharp and very direct. Here the play is very slow, positional, and with black needs to know exactly how to equalize. It's not so easy. I mean, why? Of course, white is in any case is not going to have a big advantage, but well, better if you're playing black, better you play accurately, because this is exactly the Sicilian which is like Petrov. Yeah, that if you will get slightly worse here, it's very likely you will have to passively defend for the rest of the game. That's why it's quite an important line. And also with white, I would seriously recommend you to consider playing it from time to time, because well, the black's task is not so simple. So after knight f3, black has a choice of playing queen c7 or just developing bishop e7. The idea of queen c7 is to stop white from developing his bishop on c4. Bishop e7 move is much more popular, at least on the grandmaster level. Queen c7 I don't like so much. I mean, I'm not sure black can fully equalize here. So I personally would recommend you to play bishop e7 with black. And after queen c7, the game can proceed like this. So a4, or you can also start with bishop e2 actually, because b5 doesn't work here. After a4, b4, knight d5 takes bishop b7, queen b3 white is considerably better. So while black should probably just play bishop e7 here, and then sooner or later, probably here exactly, white will play a4. So I think it doesn't matter so much whether you start with a4, bishop e2. Maybe just you can make a small trap. Why not to start with bishop e2, and maybe your opponent will play b5 and end up immediately in a worse position. So, but anyways, a4, bishop e7, bishop e2. Yes, I think it's more accurate, because sometimes white is playing a5 here, but it's a little bit early probably to put the pawn on a5, because here black has some ideas. For instance, knight c6 already attacking this pawn. Actually, engines are giving this very strange move bishop d8, but I understand the point, so that after bishop b6, black will have quite a nice square e7 for his queen. And actually, maybe it's also equalizing, because black wants knight c6, knight takes e5 now. But even knight c6, I think it's totally okay for black. Bishop b6, and now queen b8 probably. So black wants to play, I suppose, bishop d8 next. So knight d5 is a principal move. But here bishop e6. Okay, it's an exchange sacrifice, but probably it works pretty well for black, because knight c7, and now knight takes e4. And knight a8, queen a8, black has quite a good compensation here for, I mean, very nice center, d5, f5, knight on e4 is good, so very unclear position. So that's why bishop e2 is stronger in my opinion. Castles, and now, well, black has a choice, but I think none of the moves fully equalize for black, so let's consider one by one. Well, let's say first bishop e6 in a very typical Najdorf style. Here already a5, because now the problem is after knight bd7, knight g5 is quite unpleasant. I think it was, by the way, the game Grishuk against Firuza, so it's not completely equalizing. h6 is usually played here. And now knight d5, because using the fact that bishop on e6 is getting under tempi after knight d5, e d5, bishop g4, and here computer even plays c4, believes that white has some edge, but I prefer knight d2. Since we're already playing very positional chess, let's play with full control. Bishop e2, queen e2. Now queen takes e2 is just bad, because rook enters, and this position is just lost for black. So black cannot take this pawn, has to play knight d7 and simply c4, f5, b4. And because f4 is not winning a piece, well, because at least bishop d4 probably, but in fact bishop b6, yeah, it's very nice strategical idea that knight gets to e4, at some point c5 comes, and despite extra pawn, black is much worse here. So, and after b4, well, this position is very dangerous for black, because this c5 coming pretty quickly. Of course, white has to be careful about black counterplay on the king side, but this, white is almost ready to push c5 at some point, and it's not pleasant position for black. So I believe bishop e6 doesn't fully equalize. Then knight bd7 is a playable move, actually playable, but still I believe that first of all a5 is quite good already, because there is no knight c6, and after b5, ab, knight b6, there was a game Aranyan Najdic a few years ago. I think Levon played knight d2 here, and also had a small plus. But another idea is that instead of knight d2, also possible to play queen d3, and then maybe knight d2. So this position, it's not so easy for black. I mean, it's by no means bad, but white is playing very positional. Everything is under control. There are certain weaknesses on the queen side black has, so white has a potential here. But also knight d2, maybe even I would even prefer knight d2 here. And now let's say, because black is stuck somehow, it's very difficult for black to get d5, and it's not an easy position. I mean, let's say knight c5, bishop f3, bishop e6, let's say a5 already at some point, queen c6, queen e2, for example. It's still very difficult to get d5 under favorable circumstances. And white slowly playing rook d1, h3, and maneuvering around in a Karpov style. Black is quite passive here, and I believe, yeah, slightly worse. Definitely, black hasn't equalized here. So, and then maybe b6 is a possible setup, but also here bishop g5. Now already bishop g5, knight d7. In order to take after bishop f6 to take with a knight, and now knight h4 is, by the way, very interesting idea, trying to play knight f5, and after g6 knight f3. Actually not stupid at all, because now the bishop on g5 is secured, so black doesn't have h6 move, and then white continues in a slow fashion. Also the black king is a bit weakened, so probably a bit better for white. Another ways to play is like knight d2, bishop b7, rook e1, and then slowly h6, bishop h4, probably. Also, yeah, when I looked at this position with engines, yeah, it's always given a small plus for white, very little, but there is a strategical danger with this d5 square. So that I personally would be happy to play with white this position, because, well, not that it's a lot for white, but against neither such a difficult opening, so difficult to get anything at all. So here at least you have a certain small pressure and well, interesting, complicated game. So that's why I personally would advise black players to play bishop e7 here. Okay, bishop gets to c4, of course it's a bit unpleasant, but it's not dramatic. Now just don't hurry playing b5, please, because after bishop d5, knight d5, queen d5, suddenly you cannot do anything with a rook. You're losing material. That's why better first castles. Bishop e6. Sometimes black starts with knight c6, but probably it would lead, let's say, after queen e2 to similar positions, which we will consider now on the main line. Let's say bishop e6 is more common. To start with bishop e6, only that white has a very strange tactical idea here, which you need to know. Takes on e6 and knight a4. Well, the idea that in case of knight d7, I mean, now suddenly knight g5, you have a problem with the e6 pawn. But now knight g4 actually is very forced in line. Knight g4, queen d3. Yeah, now if knight d7, there are some queen b3 ideas. Again, there is an issue with the e6 pawn, so this line you just need to know by heart. So b5, you should play b5 here, knight b6, take on e3, queen takes e3, rook a7. And here, well, white, in order not to get the knight trapped, should remove the knight to d5, rook b7, then at some point immediately, or white sometimes plays queen b3 first, but then anyway, sooner than later will take on e7, and this position is, well, very nominally a bit more pleasant for white, but of course it's practically nothing, and with a few accurate moves black easily makes a draw here, I mean equalizes fully. So this is about bishop takes e6, that's why bishop b3 is usually played, and here knight c6 was always the main move. Well, h6 is logical, of course, yeah, very typical, just to avoid bishop g5, knight g5 ideas. But here white starts to have this idea, knight h4 getting to f5. I remember I won in a similar fashion a game against Veselin Topalov in 2003, rapid chess. Also, I went knight h4, trying to go knight f5. So h6, I'm not sure it's the best move because of knight h4. Then the main move is knight c6, but lately, pay attention, quite many players, including Vashila Graf, and he is a big specialist in neither, black started to play b5. Because of course it's very nice to put the pawn on b5 if you can. And it seems that, well, queen e2, queen c7, this I believe should be okay for black, because it's very important, the pawn on b5, and then you can have queen on b7, knight d7. Just always have to watch out not to lose the e6 pawn after bishop e6, fe, knight g5. But If you want, you can check games of Vashela graph here. He equalizes usually in this line with b5. But the critical test is a4. After b4, knight d5, black has to exchange everything, knight d7. And this position, well, of course, if white will get his knight to d5, will be quite a trouble for black positionally. But here, black has counterplay on the c2 pawn, and it seems like move per move, he's just in time to create the counterplay. Because, of course, if white manages knight to c4, pawn b3, rook d1, also it will not be fun for black, but black is always in time, it seems to me. But the last word haven't been said about the b5 move. So maybe still we need to see future developments, but it might be a very clear-cut equalizer. But actually the old line knight c6 seems to be very, very solid. I mean, white has a small nominal plus, but really very difficult to squeeze anything out of it. So now queen e2 or bishop g5 to move. So white is trying to fight for the d5 square. So bishop g5 makes sense. But then probably the best is knight d7, in my opinion, is the most accurate. Knight d7, okay, bishop takes e7, queen takes e7. And, well, like in Sveshnikov variation, because knight is on f3 and not, the only one knight is controlling the d5 square, not two knights, which then it would be much more difficult for black. But here, black just starts to exchange everything on the d5 square. Let's say knight d5. Frankly, bishop takes d5 is practically nothing for white. Bishop d5, knight f6, c3. Well, little bit more comfortable for white, but really, yeah, I wouldn't be afraid of this position. I think it's practically, well, equal, very close to equal. But maybe queen d8 is even more accurate because black wants to play knight c5. And now, for example, quite important line is queen e2, knight c5, rook d1. What else? Takes. And if white now manages to stabilize, well, knight e3, rook d2, rook d1, well, black can start to suffer. So that's why f5, I think, is important move, and especially important that it works tactically. After ef, bishop f5, knight e3, I mean, important that black is not losing the d6 pawn immediately. And if you will not, then it will be a typical Sveshnikov variation counterplay. So bishop g6, knight c4 with the idea, well, now to pressing the d6 pawn, and now bishop h5 works, and black is fine. Here, for example, after knight takes d6, strangely enough, rook f4, of course, well, just defending against queen c4 check. I mean, what is strange that here already black starts to fight for advantage in this position. So I think bishop g5, this is a very clear-cut equality. And queen e2 is another logical setup, queen e2, rook d1. So knight a5 now. By the way, rook c8, rook d1, queen c7 is also very solid for black, not much for white. But knight a5 is more direct move. This was played by Gelfand, by Karyakin. So now rook fd1. Of course, always if white takes on e6 and this structure, white has nothing, the knight on f3 is not good, unless he just takes by force the pawn on e6, which is not the case here. So rook fd1, knight takes b3, illuminating this bishop, and now c takes b3. This was played twice actually by Magnus Carlsen in rapid chess, but still looks a little bit strange, but in a way it makes sense. I mean, it's clear that otherwise Magnus wouldn't have played it, because of course more healthy in a classical way is to take with a b3, but then let's say queen c7, then white actually has always the issue with the c2 pawn. Black just wants to play rook c8, and it will be difficult, to remove the knight. Still, AB is maybe the main line. And after queen c7, bishop g5. Well, queen c7 because black would have been very happy to play h6 here to stop all bishop g5, knight g5. But here the pawn is hanging. That's why queen c7. And next, black will, if black plays h6, he will be at least equal. So bishop g5. And rook ac8 is a possible move. Maybe at least white can play like this and then trying to maneuver the knight to d5 where d3 b4 if white will allow, if black will allow, which is probably quite unlikely. Also, white simply wants to play knight d5. This position, well, it's playable for white, at least, but knight h5 is a very direct move. Very strange move, but it seems that it's the most clear-cut equality because, well, if bishop retreats, knight comes back to f6, so knight takes e5, bishop e7, queen e7 is also harmless, because, yeah, knight f6, rook c8, also knight f4 is coming. Therefore, the only real test is knight takes e5, and here bishop takes g5. It was a game Kamsky-Gelfand, by the way, from Kazan 2011 candidates tournament, which was won by Boris Gelfand. Queen takes h5, bishop f6, very direct line, and it ends in this position. Nothing better. White has to give back the pawn. Take, knight d4, rook a8. Well, white is nominally a bit better, of course, true, little bit better structure, but it's quite clear that the game should end in a draw. And that's why Magnus played cb3. So first of all, now he doesn't have any problem with the c2 pawn, and secondly, he's preparing maneuver like this. It's quite a long way, I must admit. Also, in case of, let's say, queen c7, yeah, then there is always rook c1, so as a c line. But yeah, also black seems to be doing well, and Karyakin, I think he played correctly against Magnus Carlsen in the rapid game. Actually, he won with black. Finally, he played very well. Queen e8, knight e1, that is a plan. And I don't know if after, let's say, h6, knight c2 and move like rook c8, if really white has anything special, because even if you bring the knight to d5, black will exchange on d5 with a knight takes d5, at some point maybe put bishop on d8, play f5. It's not much for white, if anything. But Karyakin played more aggressively. He went knight g4, very logical, knight c2, f5, so just creating counterplay. And, well, actually he slowly but surely outplayed Carlsen and won with black. So I believe that is the state of affairs in this line. Of course, white is very safe here. Black has to be very accurate because, a couple of, a little bit you make a couple of wrong moves. White gets control on the d5 square, and then you suffer, you really suffer. But I showed you the most accurate way of playing, and this is supposed to be, at the moment, supposed to be very, very solid and actually enough to equalize. So this is, by the way, this kind of repertoire against knight f3 is what Gelfand is playing. I see his game, so he's playing exactly like I tell you now. And Gelfand is also very experienced Najdorf player and also very, very deep analyst. So I kind of trust when I see Gelfand played, especially in classical chess, some line. I mean, I know that this is not a bad line for sure. Maybe not always the very best, but he works on chess seriously. So in any case, I believe black is holding well against this line, but you see that it's not so easy. Yeah? It's not very trivial, so it's playable with white also. So that is about e5. That's why I believe, again, that if you want to play f3, e5, then, well, there is nothing really so dangerous in this bishop e3, e5, knight f3 line to study a move knight g4, for instance. But still, why not to study knight g4? Because, in fact, it's now also doing very well, as I've mentioned earlier. That's why actually white more and more often now started with f3 here, because they don't want to give this knight g4 variation. So let's now check this knight g4 move. Well, bishop c1 is knight f6 is an option, of course, but we assume that people like to play chess. So bishop g5, h6, bishop h4. Now, actually, lately, bishop c1 starts to be quite popular. I mean, at least some top players like Alexander Grishuk played it in classical chess. Morozevich some years ago have played it, bishop c1. I see it starts to to be used by strong players. I'm not sure it's about the objective strength of the move, that it's a refutation of knight g4. No, it's just that the main lines are doing so well for black. It's so difficult after bishop h4 to find anything that, well, bishop c1, they just want to get a fresh position. Why fresh? Because black's probably best move is still knight f6. And now, well, if you look at this position, we have a knight with a pawn on h6 instead of pawn on h7. There were not so many games yet, and I would ask you to forgive me that I'm not going to spend now 1 or 2 hours more trying to analyze every single variation and trying to understand in which line the pawn on h7 might be better placed than on h6 and where black would rather benefit from the pawn on h6. I'm sorry that that would be really too much. I can only say that from my understanding of Sicilian, normally h6 shouldn't be worsening black's position. But of course here it's at least a new territory. So I think Grishuk tried to play bishop d3 here. So he believed that in the bishop d3 line, pawn on h6 might be not as, might be kind of weakness in future. Morozevich preferred bishop c4 line, so he found some variation there where the pawn on h6 might give white some chances. Anyways, I leave it maybe up to you to analyze full Najdorf with a pawn on h6. Well, one thing I'm quite convinced that at least you don't have to face the Najdorf bishop g5 system. That's pretty clear. But otherwise, again, I believe, seriously talking, I believe that it will not be a refutation. I mean, black will find ideas how to play Najdorf with a pawn on h6. So, but okay, bishop h4 is definitely still the main move. g5, bishop g3, bishop g7. And here, well, this position is almost, almost every move was already tried. Kasparov, as I mentioned already, had developed this system. I mean, not immediately he would get to the best possible lines, but slowly but surely he was getting there. So let's say first bishop e2 move, very logical, then h5. Well, the idea is that, of course, sometimes h4 is a threat and very unpleasant threat. So white has to do something about it. Nowadays, h4 becomes more popular than bishop takes g4. At the beginning of this, when this variation was just discovered and analyzed, bishop takes g4 was the main move. And first Gary played bishop takes g4. Here, I mean, this position he liked to play, removing the bishop somewhere and playing it. Well, what can I say? It's definitely playable. He actually won some nice games also like this. Also lost, by the way. I remember Anand winning a very nice game in rapid chess in Mainz in this variation against Gary. But it's playable, but actually now HG is practically sterilized. I mean, I don't see a single idea for white after HG. So then Gary started to take with the H pawn. First time it was against Shirov in Vaikanzea, if I remember correctly. And since then, HG, well, white doesn't have such a big choice. Bishop on G3 is out of place, so white has to be quick. So now whether he plays castle, knight c6, knight f5, well, otherwise white will just get worse. And here bishop c3, bc3, f6. Queen takes g4, queen a5. Actually, very nice strategical idea. Well, white is pawn up, but this double c pawns and also bishop on g3 is still limited. Black has a nice e5 square for his knight. So here there were few games in this position and no problem for black, just an equal position. So, and then knight d5. Knight d5 is probably the main move, the main try. Now it gets pretty direct. Knight c6, knight f5. Well, here bishop f5, ef5, bishop takes b2, rook b1. Black has other options than the line I'm going to show you, but not so easy. I mean, there was nothing very clear. But this line is already slowly but surely black managed to to more or less force a draw. I think queen a5 check more or less forces a draw. So queen d2, now bishop f6 is the most accurate move. Bishop d4 is not bad also, but at least white has some chances. But after bishop f6 it gets very direct, rook takes b7, and now castles is a strong move. And here, whether the position is just totally equal, white has nothing, whether it's a forced draw, knight takes e7 check, and now king g7. Well, this you need to memorize. Not too difficult still, yeah, but anyways, knight takes e6, rook e8 check, king d1 has to be played, and queen takes a2. And this position is a forced draw. There were games, for instance, I think Shirov Giri was game, for example. And white rather should try to immediately make a draw with knight b4, otherwise there is a chance to get worse. Queen a1 check, queen c1, queen d4 check, queen d2 has to be played, and then it's a forced draw, repetition of moves. So basically, in my opinion, bishop g4, hg4 is sterilized. Yeah, it's practically a forced draw. Therefore, after h5, maybe white should try h4. And this was played rather recently, last years, on the top level. Vashila Graf played it with white, with black. Gh. You can start, by the way, with knight c6. Anyway, knight b3, and you take on h4. It's the same. Leads to the same position. So gh, probably bishop takes h4, knight c6, knight b3. Well, here, of course, you see, yeah, the type of position that black has a, weakness on h5, not a great pawn structure, king is on the center, but very active piece, especially the knight on g4. So because of this, due to the activity, black, it compensates certain weaknesses in black's position, and bishop e6 seems to be equalizing. Or maybe taking on c3 and rook g8 is also playable. Queen d2, bishop e6. At least our authorities nowadays, which we actually care a lot about their opinion, computers, believe that it's perfectly playable for black and it's more or less equal. But still, I would prefer to play in a human way. Bishop e6. And now queen d2, rook c8. Well, black is also long castle, can get a very dangerous attack. Knight b4, so white has to be very careful. f3, almost forced, and now bishop h6 probably the simplest. Bishop g5, exchange, knight f6. There were some games on this position. I think there was a game Svidler-Gelfand, also Vashila Graf with white already playing Mamidyarov like this. Black is fine here. He wants to play rook g8 and has enough counterplay. King is actually quite safe on a8. It's quite a solid king. So that seems to be also giving nothing for white. But at least here there is more play, because bishop takes g4. There is almost no way white can even get a game if black knows the correct moves. Then what else? Queen d2, knight c6, knight b3. This is quite harmless. I believe it's just a position, b5, logical move, and I don't see why black has any problem. It's such a fantastic dragon. Yeah, knight get into e5 to c4, bishop e6, rook b8. Well, the only point that your pawn is on g5 and not on g6, but actually it's even maybe better for black that the pawn is on g5, because it secures the e5 square. So now there was a game, for example, Adams-Gelfand, I think. Adams played f3, knight e5, bishop f2. Boris played knight a5, which is a good move and easily equalized. I think in the same position Garry Kasparov played rook b8 and also got a good position. So this is really harmless, and already better to play h4 here. h4, but still now gh, bishop h4, knight e5, and black wants bishop e6, knight c4. So again, just a complicated position. Was an interesting blitz game, but still an interesting game. Giri-Gelfand here, and was just unclear, very unclear position. I wouldn't say that that white achieved much here, because black is active, and I wouldn't be satisfied with such an outcome of the opening against neither, because if I get unclear position with white, I mean, okay, yeah, it's difficult to be better in neither, but at least I want some initiative here. It's actually black who has initiative, even though, of course, he's not by no means better here. But still, doesn't look very promising, all this, so that's why main move is h3. And now knight e5, well, most of the players are playing knight e5, but actually old move knight f6, just want to tell you this, that it's not refuted at all. You can check games. The idea is in bishop c4, queen b6. There was a very interesting game, Kasparov-Polgar. Kasparov won already with white. I mean, in neither he was winning all games with black, with white. Didn't matter the color. Same position he was winning with both colors against all top players. So queen b6, and Gary sacrificed the pawn, but actually it's very unclear, this pawn sacrifice. He played knight d2, and actually Judith took the pawn f4 with very, very unclear position, but also black could just play knight d7, knight e5. I think it's not too dangerous. I mean, knight d7, actually knight e5, and maybe even knight c5 next. I think that is fine. Then the main move is queen f3, and now queen b6, long castle, knight c6, takes. And this position, there were some games. e5 was a game share of Kasparov, and it looks dangerous, but seems to be more or less a forced draw. Knight d5, take, rook h7, and black is just in time to equalize here. Usually white plays bishop e2, and now queen c5, because e5 is already an unpleasant threat. And here it looks pretty dangerous, but okay, also bishop on g3 is a bit out of place. So if black develops, he can also be better, with this very powerful bishop on g7. There is some theory, at least according to theory, something like this. White is trying to play e5, d5, and now different moves here. Well, according to engines, according to theory, black is doing okay. So I don't know, knight f6 can be an option also. Knight e5 is also perfectly fine, but I don't know why knight f6 is now out of fashion. Maybe just because everybody wants to force a draw, more or less, to make it completely forced. But if you play in black this variation, you can really consider knight f6 also. Therefore, knight e5, and now main move is knight f5. f3 also is quite popular. Quite many games on top level. Knight c6, bishop f2, but frankly I don't see much idea for white here, because first of all knight g6 is a solid move and black is very close to equalize. But I personally like very much how Boris Gelfand played this position. He played 2 games. I think he won both games with black against Svidler, I believe, but for sure against Nakamura. And he played it quite some time ago. I couldn't find, when looking with white, this line, couldn't find back then what to do against it. And I still preparing this lesson, still checked, and I still cannot find. I think it's just good. Black has no problem. So let's say h4, you just play rook c8. So queen d2, rook c8. Of course, you need to be precise here. Long castle, knight d4, bishop d4. If you give white couple of tempes, king b1, h4, he can be better. But the game is quite direct. Queen a5, a3 has to be played, and castle. Yeah, that's an important move. Looks a little bit tricky to castle with the pawn on g5. But since black is extremely active, it's good enough. h4, g4. And now, actually, Nakamura made a mistake in this game. He went queen f2 because he wanted to avoid queen e3, knight c4. So he decided to be more clever to go to f2. And then suddenly, after rook c6, black is already much better, simply. f4, rook fc8. Beautiful. And the idea that black has a very powerful attack on the c line, and Gelfand won the game in a great style. But the better move is queen e3. Now, rook c6, f4 already. By the way, also not totally clear, but probably already in white's favor. But knight c4, for example, takes. Black king is a bit weak, but he has also very serious pressure on the queen side. I mean, against white's king. So that helps him to get to be happy about his position. I mean, no real danger. f4, f6, simply. Let's say rook d3, rook fc8. And, I don't see how to mate black's king, and I don't know who is going to mate whom. Black wants also queen c5, b5, b4. So here black is fine. I believe f3, this is the best way to play with black, and I think I don't see any idea for white here. That's why knight f5 is played usually. There is a tricky move, knight d5, very rare actually move. So the idea is to transpose after knight bc6 to play still knight f5 and takes, and to transpose to the main line, which I'm going to show you. Already to have the knight on c6. But after knight d5, first of all, not so clear if after e6, this position, knight d7, queen d2, b5, f3, it's complicated. Engines give a small plus to white, but it's very, very complicated game. I don't know if white is really better here, but actually knight d5, I believe very strong is knight ec6. Strange move, but just using the diagonal. White has problem on the diagonal, so otherwise knight d5 would have been an interesting option. I will explain you why in a second when we'll be talking about the main knight f5 move. But here white has to do this, knight f5, and now it gets very, very sharp. The position, queen a5 check, queen d2, queen takes a2, rook d1. Okay, white has of course some initiative, activity, but he's 2 pawns down and also still not developed. Extremely complicated position. Has to be checked maybe a bit more, but at least my engine, I checked it, honestly, because I want to be sure when I'm advising you something. I want to be sure that there is at least, of course, everybody can misassess some things, but I want to make sure that all variation which I advise you, that there are no tactical mistakes. So here position is extremely complicated, but my engine was swearing on the Bible that black is at least not worse. So that's already a good news. And actually knight d4 is trying to play for a win here, but in fact bishop d4, you can check this move. It's probably strong also. It's good enough for at least for a draw. But knight d4, c3 now, it's only move practically. Queen d5, cd, queen a2 back, and black is slightly better. Okay, that's all I can say about this position. It's not obvious who is slightly better, why only slightly better. It looks like it's whether white is winning, whether white is losing, but it is as it is. I tell you the final assessment of the engine. So probably knight ec6 is actually a strong move, that kind of refuting knight d5. And then, so knight f5, bishop f5, ef5. Now everybody's playing knight bc6, and it's probably a forced draw, frankly. Or not completely forced, but it holds in every line. But it's extremely direct play, and maybe it's not so easy, not to everyone taste to memorize all those variations. They're beautiful, they're extremely sharp, complicated. Professional players like Grishuk, top 10 players who are playing neither, they're just trying to analyze it with powerful engines and memorize it and just make a forced draw. But I'm not sure everybody of you want to do the same, so I will offer you another, in my opinion, perfectly valuable options where black can avoid playing this main line, and I believe still be okay. So I don't know why everybody is, from playing knight bc6 here. Because now, knight d5 is practically only move for white, because if bishop e2, knight d4 is strong, and black is just slightly better already. So knight d5 is forced. e6, now white can play first knight e3, or let's say takes on e6, knight e3, it leads to the same, actually. And here, for quite some time, black was just trying to play this position, castles, but it's not easy. It's not easy to equalize, probably. White has a very pleasant plus. There was a very good game. Shirov beat Boris Gelfand in this position. Knight g6, c4. And if you play d4, then there is a blockade on the white squares. There is some trouble on the white squares. White has 2 bishops, so it doesn't seem that black fully equalizes here. So this line was a little bit troubling black before they found, of course, we know who found queen a5 check. c3, knight f3 check. And here I leave you, sorry, but I leave you alone. I will not show you all the lines because they are all shown. Everything is, there are many games of top players. It's black is holding, but you need to remember, you need to remember really a lot. But it's really okay for black. It's fine. But again, for those of you who doesn't want to enter such crazy complications, I checked, and I believe there are two ways of playing. I mean, one is maybe still slightly worse, but another one I believe just equalizing. So I don't know why there are so few games on the move knight bd7, and I promised to explain you why knight d5 people want to play, because they want black's knight to c6 already. Yeah, takes to get this position, because but then knight to c6 works. But after knight f5 takes, I believe knight bd7 is a very fine. I mean, I'm really surprised why it's not played more often. Also very interesting move is queen a5. Also very close to equality in my opinion, because now bishop e2 looks logical, but suddenly knight c4 comes, and white has to fight for equality. So queen d5, only move practically to try to get something at least. Queen b6, let's say queen b3, or first long castle, knight bd7, queen b3, probably it leads to the same. So this position, let's say rook c8, king b1, I don't know, black can play knight c6. The queens will be exchanged, let's say knight d5, probably at some point. Queen b3, a b3, and black has this e5 square for his bishop or knight potentially. Well, maybe white is slightly better. That is what at least engine pretends, but really not so much. I mean, I believe that few accurate moves and black should solve all his problems. So queen a5 is very direct move and very fine, but even better in my opinion is knight bd7. And I couldn't find any advantage for white. Of course, it was played by Artemiev, for example. There was a game Artemiev, Nair, Artemiev, both, especially Nair, he's very big specialist of Najdorf. And he clearly knew what to do against knight bd7, but at some point Artemiev made a mistake. I believe he could have equalized. And actually after knight bd7, white doesn't have such a big choice, because black plan is rook c8, knight b6, and to enter on c4. So white cannot really play for long castle. He'll just get mated on this long diagonal. So bishop e2 or knight d5. Now knight d5, knight b6. This is the idea. Immediately trying to eliminate this knight. And after knight e3, rook c8. Now black just wants knight c4 next. And it seems that everything will be exchanged, and black is perfectly fine. So that's why bishop e2 was played by Nair. And now rook c8, again knight d5, knight b6 here, and castles h4. Well, what else? Because black just wants to go knight c4 and to start having pressure on this diagonal, on the queen's side, So white also, again, as usual, in this variation, white has two bishops, and black king is potentially a bit exposed, but the bishop on g3 is somewhat out of play, it would be so much better to have this bishop somewhere on d4. So h4 was played, and somewhere here I think the mistake was made by Artemiev. In fact, maybe I'm missing something. I don't see what, but it seems to me that knight c4 is a very simple equalizer. Bishop c4, I suppose. What else to do? Rook takes c4. Let's say queen e2 and rook c5. And I checked this position. It seems to me that it just ends quite soon in a kind of total liquidation. So again, I don't know why knight bd7 is not played. If I'm missing something, well, not much. I'm not missing much, because maximum white can be a little better at best. But in my opinion, it's a simple way to equalize. So all in all, what I can say is that bishop e3, knight g4 is really, I think it's a very good line. I mean, that's why f3 maybe I can advise you to play with white f3, because I don't see what to do against knight g4. Not only because there is no real advantage, that is not a drama. What I don't like is that in many lines, black has a very active, pleasant active play, and he can even overtake the initiative sometimes. So maybe with white, what can be an option is to repeat moves and to make a draw after 3 times repetition. No, I'm joking, of course, to play something else here, like f3, or unless you find something in the main lines, I couldn't. Or maybe to try this bishop c1 and to check, to analyze it a bit. At least it's fresh, there are not so many games, and you definitely will get a playable position. So maybe white's best chance for opening advantage is not even for advantage, but at least to get a game. Yeah. So is bishop c1, and to try to prove to the whole world that in neither the pawn should stay on h7 and not on h6. Yeah, so that's it about the bishop e3, and now let's move to the f3, to those classical main lines. Black has e6, e5, nothing really else. Otherwise, white just wants to play bishop e3, and he will get with a good dragon, with a good rouser. So e6 or e5. e5, I believe, is more direct and very serious challenge for white, because it's very difficult. White doesn't have a big choice there, and it seems to me that at the moment black is holding it well. So e5 is a serious challenge, but e6 is not so easy to equalize after e6, but positions are very complicated. But we will check it one by one. So let us start with f3, e6. First, before that, I want to mention that there was a small, short moment of popularity of queen b6 move. So, that was the idea of this repertoire. If bishop e3, knight g4, and if f3, queen b6. Very compact, you don't need to study much, and would be just perfect if queen b6 wouldn't be pretty bad move, because nowadays already proven more or less that this position after g4, well, black wants to play knight c6, knight b3, e6, and this position, as very often happens when the pawn is on g5, queen e2, and bishop e3, and black is in trouble here. I mean, visually it looks like black has this knight coming to c4, and seems like there is some counterplay. In reality, well, basically there is no play. There was quite a serious reassessment actually of those positions, because some 30-40 years ago it was considered that if black manages a knight on c4, it already means he has, well, most of the time quite a considerable counterplay. Nowadays it becomes clear that it doesn't guarantee anything yet, the knight on c4, and very often white just gets king b1, bishop c1, and there is not much play. For example, here, first of all, there is very direct move f4, but even simply king b1, then let's say knight a4, knight e2, knight e5, well, second knight coming to c4, black is almost mating, it seems, but engine given, I think, 1.5 here for white. So just simply there is no attack, nothing, just not enough pieces black has to attack, and white has a very solid setup. All pieces are protecting the king, so this is simply not good. Queen b6 cannot be recommended. Then, okay, so there is no other choice than to study main lines, unfortunately. So e6, well, bishop e3 is logical. And now, lately, black started to play those positions with h5, just trying to stop g4. It is quite a revolutionary idea. I mean, in the sense, of course, everybody knew that it's possible to play h5 in those positions, but nobody took it seriously, because after h5, well, black cannot really castle, at least very often it will just get mated, and white simply plays in the center, and with the king on e8, white should be better. So that was the assessment of h5 move, that it's playable, but definitely not good enough. But nowadays, it seems that it's maybe becomes the main way of playing with black. And maybe actually it can be that maybe the only reasonable way, because otherwise in other lines black is experiencing some problems. But the question is, first talking about the h5 line, the question when to play h5. I want to warn you immediately here that in the e6 variation, frankly in e5, f3, e5 also, there will be a lot of nuances with move orders, and it can really be very difficult for you. And it's completely normal. It's difficult even for me. I mean, I also getting confused in these move orders. There are just far too many of move orders. I tried to make, preparing this lesson, I tried to make some kind of structure to formalize all ideas, all move orders, and to explain why this move is played and not that move, and what happens if black starts with h5 or with first b5, then h5, etc., etc. So I'm going to give you this knowledge because you must understand that, of course, I'm preparing this course for a very wide range of players, and it's amateurs, it's club players, but also I really believe honestly that this course can be very, very useful even for some, already professional grandmasters. So I'm trying to give as much as possible information, as much as I can afford in this format. And then you can choose. If you feel like you didn't fully get it, it's okay. I mean, it's okay. It doesn't mean anything. I mean, it's really difficult to get it. And then, since you are having this course, if you are listening to this lesson, you can come back always. So you can start to play maybe Rapid Blitz if you like one of those variations. Then you can come back and slowly you will get to this understanding of all move orders. It will, I would say, you would memorize it better, because just from this lesson, I can expect that you might have quite a mess in your head with all those nuances, details. So forgive me, but it's for your own good that you can always check it again. And finally, because it is very important. I mean, one story is about force lines. That is one story. Another story is to understand the general patterns and the move orders. It's actually very important. And this, no engine will teach you about it. So I can imagine you want to study new opening, let's say this position, playing it to play with white or with black, and you have, I don't know how many thousands of games in your database, and somebody plays here b5, somebody plays h5, then white starts with queen d2 or g4, and you are confused. I mean, it's very difficult to understand why. So I will try now to give you the explanation why this move and not that move. So then you have a full structure, and it will really be very helpful for you when you will be playing it over the board, and in general for your understanding of this position. So yes, now I continue. So h5. It's a little desperate to start with h5 here, but quite a number of players, they don't worry, and they just play h5 here, because you will see that it will not be so easy to get the h5 system otherwise, if not playing it at this moment. If of course white plays queen d2 and then long castle, this position we are going to study later. I mean, but for now, what I'm personally, I would be a bit concerned about white, for example, bishop c4 move. So white can also be clever and try to transpose to another line. For instance, if you remember knight of bishop c4, I was telling that this bishop e3 new line, which is kind of fresh and not so well yet developed, the theory, it's quite interesting, and it is like black all of a sudden played h5 in this position. So I have a feeling it might not be so easy for black, this bishop c4 move. Also, I think Fabiano Carano played a4 with some tricky idea. So the question is, will white play queen d2 here or not? It's a big question. Yeah. So I'm not sure if h5 here is sound. If black wants to get this position, which, the main position of the system, I would say with h5, which, let me just put some whatever move order, this position, So if king b1, rook c8, this is the tabia, I would say. But then the question, how black can get it? This is a very serious question. It will take me some time to try to get it now. So h5, I'm not so sure. Then black is playing b5. Otherwise, trying to get his setup. Now white has actually a choice of few moves. Each has, its venom and its nuances. So first about a4. This move is quite harmless. It's a bit too early. Of course, very, very principal move. But after b4, knight a4, e5, knight b3, d5, black equalizes. No more than that. I mean, but in general, no real problem, because white, of course, is better developed, but the knight on a2 is really bad. And it will take time for this knight to get into the game, and black will finish his development, and structurally he is doing fine. So a4 is not dangerous. Then lately, white very often started to play a3. Here we will get to this, but first I want to explain what was the history of this variation. So queen d2, of course, is the most natural move, but in my time, let's say when this variation was extremely popular, end of 90s, Kasparov played it a lot with black, and everybody analyzed it. So the most accurate, the most precise was considered to be g4. Here, the idea is that white wants black to play h6, to force black to play h6, because he cannot really develop the knight now. Knight bd7, g5 comes. So that is the idea. I mean, it's a little bit strange, I would say, idea, because now I don't see why most of us would start with g4, like me, Anand, Kasparov, Topalov, everyone almost. So it was considered to be the correct way of playing. Now I believe that if white is playing already without a3, then queen d2 is a better move order, because after g4, what was happening first? First, h6 was supposed to be practically forcing. Queen d2. Now we were playing knight bd7, long castle, bishop b7, h4. And this was a huge tabia. Very important position in this line. Kasparov played many games, beautiful games, by the way. Black with Anand, he won. Black with Topalov, white with Topalov. Actually, he was winning with either color. It didn't matter against top players, so he probably studied this position really well as it was possible with the engines, which were quite weak at that time, comparably. H4, and now black tried many things, nothing was working. The only thing which was more or less working was before knight a4, queen a5, b3, now knight c5, this variation, a3, knight takes a4, ab4, queen c7, ba4. And the theory went on and on here. d5 was the main, it's considered to be the main move, e5, knight d7, f4, and so on. At some point, rook was going via h3 on the third rank. So we all were analyzing. It was maybe the most popular position on the top tournaments, and we all were analyzing a lot this position. Well, finally, probably it's better for white. It is actually better for white, but it's tricky, you know. So I mean, I think this particular position, Kasparov won against Topalov with white and then with black, or other way around, first with black then with white. So it means the position is not so easy if you can win it with two colors. Very complicated, but probably better for white. So that was supposed to be quite a problem at some point. By the way, yes, there were some other also ways white was trying to play in other way. Black was also trying other things, but all in all, finally the problem, there was a problem. I mean, nobody could find a clear equality for black. Before, Topalov came up with a brilliant idea, actually, against g4, h6, queen d2, and now he played b4. He played b4 move, and it's very, very strong. Actually, it's practically a refutation of, I mean, not, of course, not a refutation, but I think black is just fine after b4, and I think that, well, it's pretty much established already conclusion, because, well, it's supposed to be knight a4, was supposed to be just a transposition, more or less. And unfortunately, he played it against me in the game in Vaikanzea, this very big novelty, and I lost the game because the position is very, very sharp, and here the preparation is very important. So knight a4, well, I played rather quickly because I thought he just wants to transpose, playing queen a5, let's say b3, bishop b7, something like that, of that sort. But he came up with knight e5. And this is a very, very strong novelty, and black is really fine here. Let's say I took on b4, not that I liked very much the situation on the board, but I just couldn't see any other move because, well, b3, in fact, b3 is possible. I mean, white is not worse here, but black has a lot of initiative. For example, like this, knight b2, now it d5. And I think black is at least equal. I took on b4, bishop d7, and now I made some mistake, but actually it's a difficult position to play with white. For instance, bishop f4, according to engine, is the best move. Well, really doesn't, well, I mean, doesn't make sense to me to play bishop f4, but for some reason it's the best move. But anyway, let's say bishop e7, black definitely has a very, very good compensation for the pawn, because all tactics, nothing works. Knight b6, always rook b8, at least there is d5 coming all the time. So yeah, it seems that knight a4 was more or less finished. After that, so then knight ce2, we started to try to play knight ce2, but here e5, also I think black is just fine. And let's say there was some idea, even long castle. I remember I tried to analyze this piece sacrifice, trying to get some initiative, but long-term initiative, but black is better here. So if knight f5, then simply d5 is fine. Long castle, bishop e6, ed, queen d5, and you see it in many lines that f3 pawn becomes weak. So g4, of course, is aggressive move, and you want even after h6, h4, g5 potentially is very serious threat, but the pawn on f3 is hanging very often. So finally, after e5, knight b3, probably then it's the best move. But here black is doing fine. It's just very complicated, unclear position. For instance, you can Anand play it against, I think, Vallejo, knight c6, knight g3, bishop e6. Maybe even more accurate is to play a5, because black wants to play a4 actually next. So, for instance, after knight g3, probably already a4 is okay. Knight c1, d5. A strange play. Black is just playing with pawns. Very, very strange. Chess is a very complicated game, yeah, because it doesn't look like it makes sense of black's play. He's not developing pieces, only pushing pawns, but he has a good game in this position. Because white also made quite a number of unnecessary moves with his knights. And let's say after a3, black can just take, play d5, and here it's pretty forced. Now black is fine. After d is okay, but bishop e7 maybe is even more interesting, just to play for compensation castles. Black is not worse here. So to me it seems that this line is after g4, h6, queen d2, b4, black is just fine. So but then after h6, white can play a3, and this is actually very tricky move further. Because after a3, black is going to play in the same fashion, bishop b7, queen d2, knight bd7. If knight bd7, long castle, then this position is actually, you see white included g4, h6, and with a pawn on g2, black would play h5 here. Yeah, so white managed to get the g4, h6, and we will come back to this position later. It's extremely dangerous for black, maybe even simply bad, but for sure very dangerous. So maybe then, but then if white is playing a3, this is already my idea. There were not too many games, but I got an idea maybe to play bishop b7 here, queen d2, and instead of knight b7, here to play d5. It might be holdable. Might be holdable. I mean, because for instance, after e5, knight d7, f4, probably knight c6. Maybe it's not such a bad French here for black, because white have played a3, so very dangerous to make long castle. Before comes and white can get under attack, and otherwise, why should black be worse? Or even immediately before, after a4. Instead of knight c6, b4 takes, and maybe black is okay here. Yes, so that is an interesting way to parry this. If g4, h6, and if now white is tricky playing a3, so moving to the system with a3, but already with g4 played, now using the fact that g4 is played, black maybe can manage to get d5. This has to be checked still. I mean, its position is complicated, but it seems to be interesting from black to play like this. So, and another option after g4, it's actually b4 move immediately is also playable. Now knight e2 should be played, because knight a4, I think even bishop d7 on top of everything is very unpleasant. So knight e2 and h6. Well, here it's white, of course, white is not obliged to play queen d2. He will probably make a more useful move, but still, I think this was the way Anand played also with black back that time. And yeah, maybe it's playable. For instance, if bishop g2, e5, knight f5, g6. Actually, I played it myself also, yes, with Vallejo in blindfold Monaco tournament, rapid chess. So knight g3, bishop e6. I think Vallejo played h3, I played h5, and actually won quite easily the game. No, I mean, the position actually is very double-edged. I mean, very tricky, because black wants knight c6, d5. It's very easy to get worse with white also. Also easy to get crushed with black, because white if he just manages to push f4, f5, g5, and so complicated position, but probably here in this particular case black is fine. So maybe c4, that was supposed to be a problem. Why to start with b4? Because c4, at least white has more control now in the center. First of all, nowadays engines pretend that this actually you can take and play d5, and maybe it's also equalizing. I mean, it's a little bit difficult to believe just with no development. But bishop d3, I think engines just play bishop b7, and who knows, maybe it's also enough to equalize. Or if you want to play complicated game, you can play e5. The only minus that, of course, now knight goes to c2, where it's much better placed than on b3, because it will go to e3, d5 one day. But still, after knight c6, the position is not too clear, not so clear. Black has his play on the black squares. So b4 is also an interesting option. So all in all, I think that g4 is not the best move order. And in my opinion, well, the thing is that if white starts with a3, then black can already play h5. That is an important point. Or bishop b7, queen d2, h5, or here h5. So like this, at least black can get his h5 system. Well, if white can try to be maximalistic and try to avoid, I mean, not to give black even this h5 system, then maybe queen d2 actually is a very interesting move. And in fact, it's quite difficult to get this h5 now system, because now knight bd7 is practically only move, as strange as it may sound. But there is nothing. b4 is already not working here, because it's important tempi. I mean, white haven't played g4, so hasn't weakened his structure. He will be just better. So then what? h5 here, a4 is a problem. Here it already works. Before knight a2, and it's not too bad for black, but yeah, quite dubious. I would say d5, for instance. Maybe e5, knight d7, f4, knight c5, and simply bishop d3. I think white is better here. So h5, a4 seems to be a problem. So black is not in time for h5 here. If black wants to start with bishop b7, then a4 also seems to be very good. And the same idea, before knight a2, d5, e5, knight d7, f4, knight c5, bishop d3. Of course, here it's better version for black, but still I don't think black equalized. I mean, white will castle, slowly brings the knight from a2 to c1, b3 or e2, and he has quite a good control. Typical French, but quite a good French. I think white is better. So that makes black almost only move to play knight bd7 in this position. And now, again, you see that if white castles long, then we can already play h5 if you want to play this system. And after h5, white cannot really push the center, and he will probably, I mean, he will really need sooner than later to play e3 just to stop bishop b7 at some point before will come. But h5 is not the only move. There is also an option to play bishop b7 here. And again, if a3, this position we will check later. And in case of g4, now instead of playing h6, which is quite a problem because of both h4 and as nowadays we understood also a3 is very dangerous here. But after g4, maybe black can play knight b6. This is what Kasparov liked to play like this. So he's removing his knights. Let's say a3 will be played sooner or later, rook c8, king b1, etc. He played quite a number of games with this setup. Actually, of course, as always, with success. Actually, nowadays, computers give quite a serious advantage for white in this position, but it's not everything is so clear. It's definitely playable, at least in a practical sense. Maybe objectively it is better for white, but it's not so simple, because even when I started just trying to understand why computer gives such a significant plus to white, I start to move pieces to make some logical moves, first lines of engine, and then he starts to drop the assessment. I mean, position is not clear. This line is not played practically by black just because it is too badly rated by engines, but you can try to check it. So after castle, well, black can have all those systems, but after knight bd7, now g4 is a very, very principal move already here. I don't know if you still keep on making sense of what I'm telling, because it's a bit too subtle, but it is very important. It is very important because this system is pretty much about move orders. Yeah, about who will trick whom with move orders. So if you want to play it with black and also with white, I mean, you need to try to understand why those moves are played. Why g4 here? Why not one move earlier, etc. So g4, and now knight b6 is still possible actually, but here of course white can transpose to those positions I was just talking about, a3 long castle, but here actually a4 is very dangerous, and it seems to be that black is in quite some trouble here, because if he just takes on a4, let's say this position is just better for white, at least according to theory. And Garry Kasparov played knight c4 here, at least once I remember with Leko, takes, and then Leko, I think, played a5, also quite a dangerous move, but Garry was playing like this, and that's true that this position might not be so clear. Of course, black has a lot of squares and better developed, but this g4 here, I would, of course, if I can get the pawn back to g2, white would be definitely better. With the pawn on g4, not so clear, but nowadays engines are just laughing at all of us, at Kasparov, and just saying that after long castle, white is almost winning already. Queen c7 and just playing like this, rook e1. This is the difference. In that time, engines were not so good at finding some tactical sacrifices, and because here rook b8 obviously was Kasparov's idea, I'm sure, just trying to organize counterplay on the b line, but knight f5 is just winning for white here. So this is also, knight b6 is in deep trouble because of a4. So with this move order, black cannot get this knight b6 system, simply cannot. Yeah. So he has to react somehow on g4. So what to do? Well, two moves, h6 or b4 then, yeah, because bishop b7, of course, g5 already comes. Well, still, by the way, engine is somehow holding for the moment with knight h5 and then playing g6, but it's better for white. So knight b6 on top of everything here, already a4 is strong. Then if h6, now a3, very important move. I understand how difficult it is to digest, but still, because if long castle, now b4. Now all of a sudden we have my game with Topalov. Yeah, and this knight e5, very strong novelty, and black is doing very well here. So after h6, very important is to play a3. And, black has nothing better than to play like this, rook c8. And this position is, actually I couldn't find any clear refutation of this, but nowadays nobody wants to play with black. So black is ready they want to get this position, as I already mentioned, with the pawn on g2 and with h5 play to stop this g4. Because, black doesn't have much counterplay, white just wants to start pushing. So h4, black has to play d5 already, otherwise just rook g1, g5, and white will simply crush black. So d5. And there was a game Morozevich Nakamura, some other games. Black's position is extremely dangerous. I mean, this position you can only play if you analyze it from A to Z, because you have to make only moves all the time with black, not to get a very bad position. But rook g1 is supposed to be the best move. There is a bishop e2, also very serious move. Just the white is trying to push g5. And after rook g1, d4 only move, g5 takes, knight d5 only move. Now after knight e4, g6, the position doesn't look good at all, but actually black has his counterplay with b4, and maybe it's holdable, maybe. Even though, of course, the king is eternally in the center. Not easy, especially with some open lines, but maybe it's okay. And after knight takes d5, bishop takes d5. Now Morozevich played g6, and after f5 here, black is probably holding. But maybe fe is a critical test. Bishop e4, bishop g2, and whatever it means, but engine is giving 0.5, 0.6 for white. So I don't know what can it mean in such a position. But one thing is clear, that unless you analyze it till draw with black, I mean, you shouldn't go for such positions, because it's extremely difficult to play with black, and one wrong move and just you resign. Yeah? So not a nice position to play, for instance. And it's also very difficult position to play. For instance, rook h4, engine is saying as the best move already. This move is quite difficult. And now in top two, in such a sharp position, the maneuver king b1, bishop g6, king a1. And 0.6, 0.7 for white, at least on my engine. So I don't know what it means, but I wouldn't go for it with black, obviously. Very, very dangerous. So h6, a3, seems to be not easy for black at all. Therefore, after g4, black should probably play b4, and this is now actually this position becoming quite fashionable. So I suppose, as I explained already, black wants to get his h5 system, but he cannot find a way. He doesn't like to play after bishop e3, h5 because of probably other moves than queen d2, as I've already mentioned. Here, bishop c4 and so on. And then if he plays b5, he's not in time to get h5 after very accurate move for the queen d2, knight d7, g4. So b4, and now again, black's position is extremely dangerous, but maybe it's holdable. After knight a4, now h6, and suddenly there is nothing better than long castle, knight e5, and we get again to my game with Topalov, which is good for black. So, but here knight e2, g5 is threatening, h6 and long castle. Of course, very big difference here, because of course we had knight on b8 in those positions, and we would play e5, d5, or e5, knight c6 here. After long castle, now black has only moves. Queen c7 is only move. Otherwise, white is just start to crush with h4, g5, and h4. Here, of course, white has a choice, but, since it was played by strong players, and like Anish Giri, who clearly analyzed a lot, and there was a very important game in this line, Leko Giri. Both are very, very strong in preparation, and I think till, I don't know, move 22, both played according to their preparation. So queen c7, h4, d5. Well, it looks like, of course, it can be over. I mean, just white pushes g5 somehow, and it's practically over. But, well, again, very dangerous position to play. But maybe it's holdable. Because I think now Karyakin played with Giri bishop f4, and now also no, this was Leko Giri. I think e5, bishop h2, very forced line. d4, g5, takes, rook h2, only moves. Black has always only moves. ed, rook h4. Now, absolutely amazing move. Knight g4, rook takes g4, knight c5, rook h4, d3, knight d4, bishop b7. So this position, I think, was in game Leko Giri, and both were in the home preparation. So finally, game ended in a draw. So incredible mess, extremely dangerous for black, but maybe holds. But all in all, actually, this queen d2, well, it's quite a problem. I mean, this move order, I believe, it's probably the most dangerous move order. And okay, if this position is not holding, then well, black is in trouble, because I don't see how he can equalize otherwise. But nowadays, most of the time, white started to play a3. But that gives black chance to play h5, and I believe he should probably take this chance, because well, h5 here probably is the simplest, probably to play exactly already here. Because, well, knight d7 or bishop b7 doesn't matter. Let's say queen d2. Yeah, we are talking about this position. Knight d7 castles, rook c8. Well, again, better probably to play h5, just not to give an additional option of g4. After which black probably should play this Kasparov plan, knight b6, knight d7. But even if white just plays king b1, probably the best for black is to play h5 finally. Because, I mean, still knight b6 is possible, but I don't know if white will already play g4. But d5 is very dangerous. d5 was supposed to be okay for black a long time ago, but at that time, against engines were just developing quietly. Black would also develop and equalize. Nowadays, they find that knight f5 is a very dangerous move here. So black can, so then finally what black can do is play this Kasparov style knight b6 system, but it's playable, but frankly, it's objectively probably in white's favor. Or then finally, well, not because the life is so rosy, black came up with this idea of playing h5 after a3. And, I mean, black engines, of course, who else? And strangely enough, queen d2, bishop b7, well, I always thought that maybe white can just play bishop e2 castle and pawn on h5. It's strange, but okay, black can keep his king in the center for quite a while, because he managed b5 already, so he would develop knight d7, bishop e7, rook c8. White, well, doesn't really have so much play, and then one day maybe he can even castle after he will get all his pieces out, or also having this h4 idea. This position seems to be okay for black, actually. So the test of the system is to make long castle, knight bd7, king b1, and there were games, for instance, I think Magnus Carlsen played twice with white against Svidler and against Vashila Graf, rapid chess. So black plays bishop e7 or rook c8. Anyway, both of those moves are played. Let's say first bishop e7. And here it is a strange position. I looked at it. It's again, I think, well, actually, black doesn't really have a big plan, but also white doesn't have a plan. So it's a very, very subtle play starts. For instance, rook g1 is best move according to engines. I guess just preparing just in case if black will castle at some point, g4 will come, yeah. And maybe somewhere preparing h3, h4, g4, that, g line somewhere might be. So just a useful move. Rook c8, bishop e2, again another useful move. Because black, of course, is too dangerous to castle. Doesn't d5 is a good chance to be crushed. So black is also starting, for instance, engine starts to play moves like g6 here. Some strange moves. I think Peter Swider played queen c7 in this position, and then bishop g5, and then he played, I think, queen b6, some strange play. He managed to make a draw against Magnus. And another way of playing is knight b6, then queen e1. So extremely subtle position. Really, you need to play it, to analyze it, to get the feeling of this position. Because I even saw engines sometimes playing even like king f8, king g8, just getting his king into the safe zone, and with rook on h8 just not to get mated, yeah. And white maneuvering around. I mean, difficult position. To me, my taste, definitely easier to play with white because white king is safer. Yeah, I mean, black skin is on the center. But when you start to check it, to analyze this position, yeah, I'm not sure white is really better here. I mean, maybe it's pretty equal, actually, objectively. So I think that, knight fd7, I think that was played by Vashila Graf against Magnus. And here, actually, Magnus could have gone h3 according to engine, and g4. You see why rook g1 was this move was made, and somehow, let's say g5, rook f1, trying to push f4, slightly better for white. But anyway, this system is definitely playable. With black, it's a very complicated game, and it's much better than it looks with this pawn on h5. But then the big question is how to get this system. Yeah, so that is a serious question. And another, well, maybe you can finally get also this system, just playing knight b6, knight fd7. So, but yes, to me, the main issue is queen d2 move order here, and knight bd7, g4. If black manages to find something here, then e6 is definitely playable. So that is about the e6 system. Sorry, it was really, really difficult. All these strange move orders, complicated. But I think now you have a very good base, understanding all the nuances, and then you can choose already what you want to play with white. Let's say maybe this queen d2 g4 move order, or maybe you want just to play a3 and you're ready to play with black having pawn on h5, and also with black. Yeah, how do you react against every move order? All in all, of course, I wouldn't say that that it's a bulletproof system. I mean, white is posing problems for black here. I mean, it's not easy for black. So that is my conclusion, that playable but not easy. That's why e5 now becomes, I think it becomes the most popular move, because here actually the situation is that white doesn't have such a big choice. In fact, white's play, he moves knight on b3, bishop e3, queen d2, g4 on castle. He has only this set of moves. And black has a lot of different systems, move orders. I already understand that you are getting frightened. Yet it's unfortunately true. There will be also a lot of tricky move orders in the e5 system, but I want you really to know well this, because this line is extremely important. It's one of the most important Sicilian nowadays. So now let's investigate e5. I personally think that it's most reliable. After f3, e5 because black has a choice and he can play positional system I'm going to show you. He can also play more aggressive, very direct system, so black can choose after e5. After e6, black has much less choice than here.